A handshake, a hug, and a drive to the Prime Minister's official residence in the same car. The Putin-Modi bonhomie was on full display as the Russian president landed in India for a two-day visit. This is his first visit to the country since the start of the Ukraine war. Prime Minister Narendra Modi received him at the Parliament airport and hosted him at a private dinner at his official residence. Government sources tell us the visit is expected to significantly strengthen the economic cooperation. India is looking to narrow its trade deficit with Russia, and multiple avenues are being explored to boost Indian exports, particularly in pharmaceuticals, automobiles, agricultural products. Greater access to the Russian market could translate into stronger opportunities for Indian businesses, job creation and improved outcomes for farmers. That's not all. Several agreements and MOUs are expected across shipping, healthcare, fertilizers and connectivity. Closer cooperation also on the cards in people-to-people relations, mobility partnerships, culture and scientific collaboration. To take this forward, I'm now joined by Ravi Agrawal, Editor-in-Chief of the Foreign Policy magazine. We'll also be joined by G. Mohan Kumar, the former Defence Secretary, in a short while from now. Let me come across to you, Ravi, right now. How do you see the optics of this visit? President Putin getting down from the aircraft, PM Modi breaking protocol to receive him at the airport, and then both leaders travelling together in the same SUV, spending almost 30 minutes one-on-one away from everyone's glare. And now they're having dinner at Lok Kalyan Marg, the Prime Minister's residence. So how do you see the optics at the start of the visit?
Well, the question, Parikshit, is the optics for whom? So I think there are basically three audiences here. There's the Russian domestic audience, the Indian domestic audience, and then the global audience, and primarily the American audience within that. If you are in Russia right now, the symbolism of what you're seeing is that Russia is not a pariah. That despite the best efforts of mostly Western countries to sanction Russia, to isolate it, remember there is an ICC warrant against President Putin, which means he cannot actually travel to countries that are signatories of the International Criminal Court. India, of course, is not, nor is the United States. So there's a real sense of defiance. And I think Putin will be very cleverly playing up those images for his viewership at home. In India, of course, this is really a sign of how India has options, how despite the falling out and the tensions between the United States and India, India retains optionality. It is able to have other friendships independent of the United States. It is able to have defense ties, oil ties, all of that despite the fact that it is reducing in recent days and weeks because of sanctions from the United States. And then lastly, there's the global optics, as I alluded to earlier. For the rest of the world, this is a sign not only that Russia isn't truly isolated as much as many countries in the West would like, but that we are entering an era in which countries are hedging their bets and are looking for more options, and the United States is no longer the sole hegemon.
Ravi, over the years, we've always seen this massive trade deficit between India and Russia. The bilateral trade of $69 billion is in Russia's favor. India manages to export just about $4.8 billion worth of goods and services to Russia. This time, the Deputy Prime Minister of Russia, before coming here, had said that we would like to open up the Russia market for Indian exporters in pharmaceuticals, textiles, steel, agriculture, marine products. So do you feel that at a time when Russia is cornered by the United States, by Europe, it doesn't have too many friends in the world, Russia will finally make sure that their market is opened up for Indian goods in a big manner?
Look, I'm sure they'll do that, but the trade numbers you're referring to are going to change dramatically in the next few months anyway. And that is because India has already begun to sharply reduce the amount of crude it's purchasing from Russian companies, and that is because of the latest sanctions on Rosneft and Lukoil, the two biggest Russian oil producers. So that imbalance of India importing a lot more than it is exporting is going to change to some degree. That's one thing. The other thing is that, sure, I mean, Russia will try to open up its economy in the sense of importing more from India, But remember, Russia is not still a great bet for any country to count on when it comes to trade or economics. The sanctions currently in place on Russia are sizable. They could change and evolve over time. But remember as well that Russia has really transformed its economy since 2022 into a wartime economy, which means that it is very dependent on defense manufacturing and less so on other forms of economic growth. So, if I were an Indian policymaker, sure, you can balance this relationship a bit, but that is not what this is about, number one. And number two, India has all these other options. It doesn't need to worry
Right.
about textiles when it comes to Russia.
Do you feel that perhaps it was Putin's visit to India which may have also delayed the India-US trade deal? Do you think people sitting in the White House, President Trump, would be watching this visit very closely, and the outcome, the optics, the joint statement for the future will impact the final phase or the final stretch of negotiations between India and US?
Not that much, no. I don't think policymakers in Washington are watching this that closely. Remember, Putin also visited the United States. He was in Alaska just a few months ago. I think the Trump White House understands the dynamics that India faces. And look, they've already been very tough on India with sanctions. They can already see that India is pulling back its crude purchases from Russia. So, from the American perspective, they are getting a lot of what they want. There are a range of reasons why a potential US India trade deal is complicated. It will take time. And I think that is going to play out in its own way at its own time. I wouldn't tie that necessarily to this particular visit.
Right. Now, in terms of strengthening the BRICS framework, strengthening the SCO framework, what do you think Putin would like to achieve from this visit? And what would be the priority from the Indian side, according to you, to have a win-win visit for both sides?
So Putin has already got what he wanted. To be honest, the visuals that you've already been showing on your screen and the visuals that Russians are getting back at home, that is what Putin needed. He wants to be able to tell his people and tell the world that he is not a pariah. And that mission accomplished. He's done that. On the other stuff, I mean, look, BRICS has its own limits. SCO has its own limits. These are all different groupings that countries are getting together to create to form, minilateral groupings that are separate from the United States. I see all those movements as gathering some steam as the United States shuns multilateralism. We also saw that at the G20 last month in South Africa. But I wouldn't place too much emphasis in what these groups can achieve. I mean, remember, the BRICS is also heavily diluted at this point. I mean, Iran has joined BRICS. You've got a range of African states that have joined BRICS. And so its ability to actually have, for example, a common currency, I think that's laughable at this point. For them to have free trade with the amount of sanctions you have on Iran and Russia, also laughable. So really, I think what these groupings do is create openings, optionality, discussion points, not too much more than that. And certainly it is not a cause for great worry in the United States or in Europe.
All right. Thank you very much, Ravi, for joining us. And you're right, because this is eventually the India-Russia annual summit. It's been happening for the last 23 years, so it was on everyone's calendar. Everybody knows that last year, Prime Minister had gone to Russia. This year, Putin is coming to India. And this will happen next year as well and the year after that. Thanks once again for being with us. Now we go over to G. Mohan Kumar, the former Defense Secretary. Mr. Kumar, thank you very much for being with us. As someone who's closely watched the India-Russia defense partnership unfold, we also have a 10-year defense program that the two sides had agreed upon in 2021, and it goes all the way till 2031. How do you think this visit will take the defense partnership forward?
Good evening, Parikshit. Thank you very much for having me on the program. Yeah, it's a good question because India and Russia, how we can defend defense partnership is not a real question because we have already had deep defense partnerships. Say once upon a time, see, Uh, we were 70% of our systems were Russian, and these days, the purchases have come down. We buy nearly say 35% of our requirements from Russia. But currently, the geopolitical situation is so fluid that there is so much competition for India's market, in the sense that India is one of the largest importers of defense equipment, and definitely the European countries and America, for USA, would definitely like to have a large slice of the cake, and therefore they may not take kindly to India deepening a defense partnership with Russia. But having said that, defense partnerships are all decided by or determined by the national interest, and it's not anybody else's interest that concerns us. But so as a consequence, we will have to find a way of deepening a creative partnership with Russia. See, earlier our most of our dealings were in purchases. Like Russia was selling materials to us; they were allowing us to manufacture some of those things here, and those things were, of course, the normal type of equipment, as well as the aircraft and very advanced systems also. So it's not that Russia didn't have a stake in what India was doing. I mean, a large, deeper partnership was there even then. But now, of course, now that it has come down, if we want to deepen the partnership, I think it should be a win-win type of situation that we need to create. And I think it should be more
Absolutely.
production oriented.
Mr. Kumar, it's often, yeah, it should be more production oriented.
Yeah.
A lot is always spoken about the India-Russia partnership being, almost ironclad allies, a 70-year-old partnership. But when it comes to actually supporting us in hours of crisis or supporting us with spares, service, maintenance, how has Russia's record been?
Well, I would say that the record has not been very good. In fact, in the past, one of our major problems was the low serviceability of the Russian aircraft, the fighters. That's mainly because, see, the logistics were poor. So the spare parts and components and other things were not available at the right time. And there was hardly any effort coming from Russia to help India to indigenize those materials. And we even tried, there were efforts made to have joint ventures with Russian companies to produce those parts here, but then that nothing really came off. So that is actually a negative point. And whatever we do in future should take that aspect also into account, because we need to be wiser by experience.
Right. I would now ask you about the Su-57 and the F-35. Donald Trump has thrown an offer at India to buy F-35s. Russia and Putin are coming with a proposal on the Su-57. We've not made up our mind, but what do you think India should keep in mind while choosing either of these platforms? And Mr. Kumar, as someone who's been the defense secretary, do you feel India will actually choose either of them, or will say that, fine, we'll just go with our own indigenous program. It'll take 10 to 15 years, but we'll only focus on that. Neither will we buy US, neither will we buy Russian. What do you think India's approach in the long term will be?
That's a very good question, Parikshit. Actually, for us, the induction of fifth generation aircraft is an urgent need, if I would say. Because, you look at the threat perceptions in the neighborhood. China has advanced technology, and whatever China has, Pakistan is also part of that. And it's a matter of time before advanced aircraft like the J-35 finds its way into Pakistan, and that will pose a challenge. So, and at the same time, India's own AMCA, which is going to be a fifth generation aircraft, is not going to be available till the turn of, I think, the end of the next decade, if everything goes well, according to our plans. So I think that there has a gap, and that gap needs to be filled up. But this need not be filled up by a large-scale commitment to buying this any kind of fifth generation aircraft. It should be sufficient to meet our interim requirements. So there's a choice between F-35 and Su-57. The choice is purely to be made on merit without any fear of failure. And
Absolutely.
but at the same time, we should also remember that if you have, suppose you get into the Su-35, Su-57 aircraft, and Russia has offered to manufacture them here. See, then if you have the same old manufacturing problems and same old spare part problems, then we will still be in trouble because the serviceability will be of a low level. But having said that, if you compare the costs, the Su-57 is far cheaper than F-35. And having F-35 will have its own problems because US will insist on a deeper partnership with them. We have to share our information. We should have several agreements. And that, of course, will affect our strategic independence. And therefore, it's
Mr. Kumar, my final question.
Yeah.
Mr. Kumar, at this time, when Russia is cornered, do you believe that India, despite a very old partnership, should we try and extract a pound of flesh? If you were the defense secretary right now, what would you like to achieve from this partnership to ensure that we get more bang for the buck?
Yeah, but Parikshit, one thing we should be very sure of. If you are buying this aircraft, we should not get bogged down or saying, we are aircraft, the serviceability is poor. And then if you want to buy it, of course, definitely there should be some kind of quid pro quo. So we need to use our buying power. I found that in the past, we have not been using our buying power very effectively. That's one reason why we have not been able to access technology as fast as we should have done. So we should now use this as a leverage for getting better technology or more transfer of more technology. Having said that, I also feel that the technology transfer in the past has also been very superficial. See, we have been building Russian engines here, but we still do not know how to build an engine ourselves. So that's a paradox.
Right. Thank you so much for joining us with that very comprehensive view on the India-Russia defense partnership. So clearly, India should push Russia more to ensure we get a very good deal for whatever we have from them and whatever we buy in future. It's time for a short break here on Global Lens. We continue to decode Putin's visit to India with former diplomat Ajay Bisaria, who was the Joint Secretary Eurasia in the Indian Ministry of External Affairs several years ago. He's been our ambassador to Pakistan and Canada. He's joining us on the other side. Welcome back. You're watching Global Lens. Our big focus here continues to be on President Putin's India visit for the 23rd Russia-India Annual Summit. We're talking about its significance here. And joining us is former Indian Ambassador Ajay Bisaria. Ambassador Bisaria, thank you very much for being with us here on Global Lens. Now, one of the priorities for India, and perhaps the biggest priority, is to reduce the trade deficit with Russia. How will India achieve this time around?
Yes, thank you for having me. It is certainly a weak link in the India-Russia relationship. This has been an extraordinary partnership. It's a special and privileged partnership. And the whole sequence of annual summits has been going on now for 25 years. This is the 23rd summit that Putin is coming for. But clearly, the sense on both sides is that while the G2G relationship is very strong in terms of the defense component and now the energy component, the B2B component has been largely missing. What we saw last year was a situation of a surge in trade, and that was largely thanks to a surge in imports. But what we really need to do in this relationship is increase the level of trade, and both sides are very well aware of that, which is why we have an extraordinary response to this business forum this year, which is being led by FICCI, where a large number of Russian businessmen have descended on India. They are in conversations. So I think that is the challenge, to increase the non-oil trade and to increase the Indian exports to Russia, to bring down this deficit, which was almost $60 billion last year.
On the defense front, of course, Russia is going to make a pitch for the Su-57, the S-500, and these are possibly decisions that India will take in future, not tomorrow. Having said that, what do you want to see achieved from the defense partnership, and what kind of impetus will the Putin visit and this 23rd annual India-Russia summit give to India-Russia defense ties?
I think defense is always a very strong component of the India-Russia annual summit. The way the diplomatic architecture is planned, there was a military commission meeting on the eve of this visit by Putin, and that was a conversation between the two defense ministers. The attempt clearly is to smoothen supplies of existing contracts, and that means the S-400 system, which India already is buying from Russia. But there always are futuristic, conversations on the future of the relationship, the future of the defense relationship, and multiple platforms which Russia gives exclusively to India. And right now there's talk about the S-500 air defense system, as well as the Su-57 platform, which is the air platform, the 5th generation fighter aircraft. But these are very, very early times in the conversation. You must remember that what India is also attempting is by 2030 to have significant domestic production, significant technology transfers, and significant defense exports. So for that, India needs partners who will not give black box technologies or technologies which will not be shared with India in certain critical parts. What India would need Russia to do is to have strong commitments of making in India and transferring that technology. So I think those conversations will take place, but right now there'll also be an attempt to smoothen the flow of existing armaments that have been ordered.
Right. The agreement on legal migration of skilled professionals to India and Russia, how is it important at a time when the US is putting restrictions on the H-1B visa program? And what will really be the interest of Indian professionals to move to Russia? Because Europe and United States, Canada, Australia, these are the avenues which are always preferred by professionals.
Well, I think the big picture is that global mobility is important to India. India sees its manpower, its human capital as a resource which can be exported globally. There are multiple mobility agreements, at least 21 agreements in place. Hopefully there will be one with Russia which will be pushing or easing the legal migration of workers. But, you know, the way India is seeing itself now is as a global talent hub. And there's a global shortage, not just in Russia, but globally, of talented, skilled individuals. And the back end of the mobility program is certainly the skilling program. And once India has that skilled manpower, India is willing to, the people are willing to travel to different geographies, to Europe, to Russia, elsewhere. And wherever things are smoother, whichever country makes conditions better, that becomes the net beneficiary of this India as a talent hub. And I think these conversations will take place over the next couple of days, and hopefully we'll have some outcomes there.
Finally, the global atmosphere in the context of which this visit is taking place. You had 3 envoys of UK, Germany and France writing an op-ed criticizing Putin on the eve of his visit to India, stating that he's responsible for stalling peace talks with Ukraine. Now, that was also not taken very well by the Indian government. We said that this is very unusual. We've taken note of it. There is US pressure as well to reduce and restrict the relationship with Russia. How do you think India is going to have to manage pressures going ahead?
Well, I think that is the art of diplomacy. That is what India needs to do, is that in this time of geopolitical churn, manage this sensitive relationship while practicing its strategic autonomy and managing a multi-alignment posture. What we saw recently, the European envoy's writing and the Russian envoy's rejoinder is Indian democracy is at work, where we are allowing, or we are not strenuously objecting to different global forces or global partners having a conversation and expressing disagreement about what India is doing. But India is clearly managing a very sensitive moment, because this is a time where, as you know, the India-US trade agreement is up in the air, the India-EU trade agreement is up in the air, and Russia-Ukraine war conversation is taking place with the mediation sort of the United States. So all these sensitive issues play in the background of this bilateral relationship, and India will do what it has to in its national interests, but being sensitive to these background stories, which will also have to be managed.
All right, Ambassador Bisaria, thank you very much for joining us, telling us about the critical areas of the India-Russia partnership and what we can see as likely to be achieved over the next 2 days. Thanks once again for being with us here on Global Lens. All right, with that, we come to the end of Global Lens. Thank you for watching. Goodbye.